All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and wow, am I excited for our guest today. We got Mark Scrimenti here today. We're going to be talking with Vivid Path. We are going to be talking about breaking through plateaus to grow your business. Mark, thanks for being here today.
You're welcome, Damon. It's great to see you. I always love talking to you, and I'm excited to talk about this today.
Oh man, we're gonna have some fun because you have incredible experience, incredible e-commerce experience, other various background experience. It's just so fun to talk to you because you've been there. That's the thing that I really enjoy talking with you, Mark. And you've had to work these businesses through these plateaus, and that's why I think it's going to be really fun talking to you about this today. So,
Well, likewise.
yeah,
You
let's
know your stuff
take
too.
off. Let's take
Cool.
off. So tell us about your background, Mark, and how you really got here doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, how far back do you want me to go? I can give you the abridged version.
There you go.
Starting maybe in chapter 26, if my career is a book, and that would put me about 2018. And so this is right after a 12-year stint in e-commerce, online retail, selling musical instruments, and I've talked to you about that company before. We can talk a little bit more about it
Mm-hmm.
later, um, but I'll move on. We did everything in-house there. I'll talk about that a little bit. And that ended after 12 years, and I took some time off, and I'm happy to talk about that too. But then, it was on to the next thing. And, I found a role as a chief product officer, chief operating officer at a software as a service company. And it was an interim role. It took me about 10 months to find that role. It checked all the boxes, and it had the potential to be long term. And after the 90 days, it's like, this is just not a good cultural fit. And, it was really disappointing. And so here I am after a 10-month job search, like starting over yet again after being in
Yeah.
one place for 12 years. And that was an interesting period. I had to kind of scrape myself off the pavement, for a few weeks, and then just kind of get back up and at it again, going out to the networking groups and all that. And I was up for another like chief operating officer, chief product officer position at a software company right around the time this pandemic started. I think this was just before I met you, and that just evaporated, with the
Yeah.
pandemic. And so here I am, and I'm like, what do I do now? And that role was an EOS shop, and they were. Do I need to spell out what EOS is for the audience?
No,
The
they
entre-
probably know.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I had read the book Traction and Rocket Fuel and taken the Colby and taken the online courses and everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm an integrator. That's what I've been doing, for at least 15 years. Uh, but then, that was fresh on my mind. And, as soon as the pandemic started, the possibility of working remotely, and having clients in other cities and so forth became possible. So I'm like, why don't I just hang up shingle as a US integrator, fractional CEO? I had heard about this fractional thing, right, about 5 years ago, and at the time I knew two guys in Chicago who were doing it, and you had
Yeah.
to go drive out an hour away to find out what this fractional thing was if you were interested, and I was interested. Now, of course, everybody's a fractional,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as a coach, which is the other thing I do. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I started the fractional thing, and I got my first, few clients, and mostly word of mouth networking, and kind of figured out how it works and what I'm doing. And I worked with EOS, which is a great framework, but a lot of the companies who say they're using EOS, they're self-implementers. About 10%, hundreds of thousands of companies use EOS, and about 10% at best use an implementer. So, they're kind of half in, half out. You become the
Yeah.
implementer as integrated. That's a whole other story I can talk about. But so the search for a framework was something that another framework or my own framework was part of the deal. And then in the process, um, somebody came up to me, and an old employee, and said, hey, do you do any coaching? Because I appreciated you back at the old company when you were in a leadership position, I could use some coaching. And I'm like, I've been thinking about that. People had suggested, you'd be a good coach, or, I did a lot of coaching, when I was at this company for 12 years. You bring people up, you mentor
Yeah.
them, you coach them. We hired a lot from within, we grew from within. So I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's do it. And so that became my first coaching client. And I realized I really enjoy coaching, and it's been very satisfying. And along the line, so that's one-on-one leadership coaching. I'm like, EOS is great, but it's kind of missing some of the people elements. And fortunately, I found this new framework. It's called System and Soul, that spun out of EOS for that very reason. So one of the founders of System and Soul was an expert EOS implementer for 11 years, Chris White. I don't know if you know him. He's a great guy. You two would like each other.
Very
Great
good.
storyteller. And, he had a lot of success. He's a Gina Wickman protege. But he and a client spun out after, a while, and said, look, we need more. It's EOS is great on process, it's great on structure systems, but the people side, like that's at least half of any organization is the people side. So that's the soul side of the system and soul, and trying to
Mhm.
bring more balance to that. And I discovered this framework. I really love it. I think you get everything that you get from EOS Plus. I think they've made some refinements to the process side of things, but you also get the people side, leadership development, cultural engineering, really strategic road mapping, that's a little bit more robust and purposeful as far as I'm concerned, compared to US. But I'm not here to tout a system. Like, these are all tools for me.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
tools in the kits. I can do either. Right now, I've got an EOS client as a fractional. So I do a little bit of, I kind of got like at least 2 or 3 prongs to my, it's sort of a portfolio career at the moment. The fractional COO work, the one-on-one coaching, and then the system and soul is more of a leadership team coaching. So it's a founder, CEO typically, and their leadership team.
Okay. So
Long answer.
no, it's good though. It's good though, kind of, because the thing that you got that many coaches don't have is you've got a plethora of experience across different industries. You've walked the walk more than a lot of people have studied the walk. So it's very applicable when you're helping people, I think, to be able to teach them, coach them, help them, lead them from a point of, I've been here. I can feel what you feel right now because I've felt that. And this is what I think we should do from here, or maybe you want to consider.
Right. And this is something that I talked to an EOS implementer recently, and he said, frankly, you don't have to necessarily have done anything except pay the $40,000, $60,000 to get the license, and to be an EOS implementer. That, I mean, there's a lot of really great ones out there, no
Mm-hmm.
question about it. But just having the certification doesn't necessarily mean anything. And so yeah, practical experience helps a lot, and I can draw a lot from my experience in e-commerce. So talk about that. This place where I was for 12 years. So it was an e-commerce company and online retail. We sold musical instruments, and we built everything in house. So we did product in house. We built the software in house, the front end and the back end. We did digital marketing in house. So we did SEO, SEM, social, email, video, YouTube, everything in house, and all the engineering and analytics and so forth. So it was really a breadth of talent under one roof. We had a call center, and the company had plateaued after maybe 10 years, for about 4 or 5 years at 40 to 50 million mark, and really was lacking structure. So I came in originally as a business process analyst, and then I went into, kind of inherited the marketing team and did some creative direction because I had some writing background, and I worked for some startups previously, and anyway, I took that on, and then the operations guy got fired, and I took that on. So then suddenly, like a lot of the company is reporting to me, and the main thing that was missing was structure and process. So we've talked about this a little bit before. So implemented Agile Scrum, was the first Scrum Master, a lot of DIY, hands-on. Then you find somebody else to do it better than you, and you hand it off, you build a team around it, and you move on to the next thing. And after a while, we had the, good leadership team in place, and we grew. We saw a lot of growth during that time, the time that we were there, a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
And, about 100 million in growth over 10 years. And I'm always looking for what's next, and
Yeah.
what and for growth. And so, I mean, this is where I learned about operations, though. This is where I learned to love operations, to the extent that I can say I really love operations. I think I do. It's about building things. It's about connecting the dots. And it's at least half about the people, working with people, figuring out how to align everybody, figuring out how to grow people and help them, reach their career goals without leaving the company if possible. So we saw a lot of, promotion from within as we identified people's strengths and talents, and cultivated career paths for them.
Yeah.
As long as you're growing, you can do that. Rather than, okay, I've gotten everything I can get from you, and now it's time for me to move on to the next place. So we're able to maintain a lot of talent that way.
Yeah.
And,
growth does allow you to give people great career paths. That's for sure.
Right.
And when you're and challenging career paths too.
Right. Good challenges. Right.
Yeah. So on that journey and other ones, as you talking, today we're talking about breaking through these plateaus when you're trying to help these companies grow. And it's something you talk about on your profile on LinkedIn and the things that you do. What are some of the plateaus that you saw in your experience in either that company, other companies you've been in, where you go, okay, here's some situational plateaus that I've walked in on?
Sure. Well, that one was a lack of structure and process, which made it was impossible to really prioritize work.
Okay.
And in particular, it was tricky in particular because the founder CEO who had built the original e-commerce tech stack and infrastructure, the website, had handed it off to chief engineer, who changed everything, and the two of them were no longer speaking to each other. So, the first guy had to find out what the second guy knew before he let him go, and that was my job. Like, unbeknownst to me in the beginning, but facilitate that transition, and in a smooth business transition, and keep everything running, find out where everything is, how it works, and then move on to the next thing. And so so that was one issue. And then and no process, no structures, because that was a situation where, like, either the CEO tells the guy what to do and he does it, or he doesn't do it, and that's no way to grow a company. So implementing a process is one. Something else that I've seen and is very common, especially with my fractional clients and some of the coaching clients, is a founder CEO who is still wearing 16 hats, and they're doing all this stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and they can't get out of being in the business to work on the business. And so that's an important distinction I'm always trying to emphasize. I had a conversation with somebody about it today, where she's a sales acceleration fractional CSO. She's great. She knows, if you're listening, you know who I'm talking about. And she was saying, and people have a hard time understanding, working on the business versus working in the business. I'm like, because to me it seems obvious, but like so many things, if it's the water you swim in, it's going to seem obvious to you. But really making that distinction clear, and that is something that I have really focused on, where I'm like, okay, think about it. One metaphor, and I was trying this out on her, because I'm like, yeah, it's really hard to communicate. But one metaphor I'm testing out here, you can tell me if this works for you, is sort of software development. So I've been pretty much in the software space my entire career in one way or another. And this idea of, like, you got your production environment, right? That's your day-to-day work. That's where your job description, your roles and responsibilities. Maybe you have a mission for that role or job function, and you're being held accountable for those things with KPIs. But then if you but then there's the development environment. So that's like where new software is being built. Like, you roll something out and it's kind of crappy. The features it doesn't work very well. It doesn't look very
Got some
good.
bugs. Yeah.
Yes, that stuff just doesn't work. And you're working on a dev, and usually it's gonna be like a dev, QA environment, then a staging environment. Then it gets integrated back into production. Well, like to me, like that cycle, that build cycle is really important for every business. And whether you're in software or not, you need to like separate out the working on the business from the working in the business. The working in the business, that's your day-to-day job. The working on the business is how you scale your business. And
Mhm.
you need to carve out time for that. You need to put it in its own cycle. I like to put it in a sprint, like an agile scrum sprint, like a 2-week sprint. And so I have my own thoughts and theories about
Mhm.
these work cycles. I think that the daily work cycle, the production work cycle is pretty much it's a day-to-day thing. Then you got your weekly alignment cycle. Those are your one-on-ones with your team members. If you're having them, you should be having them. If you're not, your team meetings, your leadership meetings,
Mhm.
um, and your L10 for EOS, and then also like you need a build cycle. I like a 2-week cycle for that, but a build cycle that's separate, because otherwise it doesn't get done. And, you know, here again, EOS works and it can work in that space. I even with EOS though, like and rocks, I like to put them in its own sprint so we can talk about them separately outside of the L10 meeting, and make sure that people are making progress.
Yeah.
Between meetings, and we're biting off bite-sized chunks that they can finish in that 2-week cycle, blah blah blah. But you're building something, and then you're integrating that back into your production environment. So to me, that I don't know if that works. Does that make sense to you as a metaphor for in the business versus on the business? It's a classic Michael Gerber from E-Myth Revisited
Yeah. It
distinction.
does. It does make sense. And I like your adaptation of using a agile sprint or the scrum or the whole thing where you're talking about we have a
Yes, sprint.
cycle that we're going to finish a project, because I think what happens with EOS and other ones, when you talk about the rocks, those are typically quarterly goals, and even sometimes quarterly goals are too big for you to break them into the bite-sized pieces. And what
Right.
you often end up is like, oh, it rolls from one quarter to the other because we didn't significantly or didn't take the time to break it down into the bite-sized pieces that we can get done in these shorter time frames. And
Exactly.
and
And
they just lag. They just lag.
that's one thing I like about System and Soul is that we use OKRs. So we just call them quarterly objectives, and we use OKRs. Have you used OKRs
No, I
before?
have not. Explain them.
Objectives and key. It's objectives and key results. So it has its own long history. Andy Grove and Intel and Google, made it famous. And Measure What Matters. That's John Doerr.
Yep.
Great book, and a website. But it's a goal setting methodology, and it's more art than science. But I think it works really well, not for an innovative organization like Google, who's all their products are, they're all constantly innovating. It makes sense for that to be part of their regular,
Yes.
day to day and quarterly, yearly, the way they do everything and measure things. But for most of the businesses I work with, small business, this is how I do that build cycle I'm talking about, or like rocks. It's like you create OKRs. These are your quarterly objectives, and the objective is really a goal that you've stated, and the key results are measurable steps that if you do all these things, like 5 things, if you can say, yep, I did that, and they have to be things that you can say yes or no, that's done.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's I practice 5 times a day for 1 hour a day, playing the piano or something, or I finished this draft, or I released this thing, or if you check all the boxes, you've met the objective. Now that's the key. If you check all the boxes and you still haven't met the objective, then you haven't defined the measurables or the objective correctly. So they kind of
Mm-hmm.
work off each other, you know what I mean? And you start out maybe with an objective, and it's like, wait, is that really what we want to do, or is that really how we want to put it? Because how you word something makes a difference. And then you're looking at, okay, what are the measurable things that we can do that when we've done them, we know that we've met that objective. It means we
Yeah.
will have met that objective.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, we can lay out things with if you don't have clear start, stop, this is done, that's done points, it's really hard to do those kind of things. But that's cool how you're, breaking it down into the shorter cycles so that you can keep that momentum moving. Because
Right.
I think in the plateauing companies, and this is a kind of a lead into this, is when you run into the plateauing companies, what is happening is those kind of things are not getting done.
Right. Because everything builds on each other, and you want small modular pieces that are reproducible, and you want quick wins and all that, but they have to build towards something. And
Mm-hmm.
you're building some margin in, with each cycle that, it's like becomes the input to the next cycle. And they all, they interact, these different cycles, they kind of stack on top of each other and inform each other, but you got to be building towards something. And you're always aligning. This is where, okay, system. So like, this is the thing that I'm passionate about is the roadmap. And I love that System and Soul has a roadmap, because it's really becomes the one page strategy that, it's the filter that you use for all your decision making, and everything that you do, your objectives, need to align with that.
Yeah.
And so that, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
I do.
It's funny you're saying this, because we were just doing this in a meeting earlier this week. We were talking about that very thing. Kurt Anderson and I were like, listen, this is the objective of the business. This should help guide what we're doing, because we really, it keeps you so focused when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
that's
go for it.
That's the thing that I get excited about. I mean, the operation stuff, the cycles and the projects and planning, that's the meat and the potatoes of it. But, the bigger picture is, is starting with why, the Simon Sinek thing, having strategic purpose. Like, everything starts with purpose, because, that's what motivates you and keeps you going, through tough times and good times. Peter Drucker said, I love, this quote. He says, profit for a business is like air for a human being. If you don't get enough of it, you're out of the game. But if you think your life is merely about breathing, you're really missing something. So nobody really cares about your profit. Nobody really cares about your profit margin. I mean, except for you. And you can incent some people, and that might make them care about it more. But ultimately, people want meaningful work. There's this, and that's, they want to work towards something that matters, and something that's inspiring. And that's what, and people have a hard time with this, because, like, well, I just sell widgets, and try to treat my customers well, and sell at a fair price. What's the purpose in that? Well, you gotta think about it, but there's always a purpose. It's like the ripple effect. What about, what kind of what kind of difference are you making in your customer's life, and the people whose lives they're touching? Or if it's B2B, like, think, not only do you need to know your clients' businesses really well, but you need to know your clients' businesses, and your clients' clients. I mean, you need to keep thinking outward like that. And there's a recent survey where 90% of professionals were saying they would sacrifice up to 23% of their lifetime earnings for work that is always meaningful. So think about that. That's like almost a quarter of their lifetime earnings.
Yeah.
And big surprise, they're your most productive people. And so this is like, attracting and retaining talent is, a huge thing for everybody. And what this survey says, and it's proved out in all sorts of other ways, other, research, that your best employees, money matters, but only to an extent. They'll take less money for work that is meaningful. So what is meaningful work, and how do you create that? And to me, that's what this, starting with why. So you're looking at, what's your vision? What's your big, hairy, audacious goal? Like, what's the impact you want to make on the world, and by when, and why are you doing that? Because your purpose is what keeps you going, and then you're looking at your core values, and how do they align out, through everything you do towards, attaining that vision that you're trying to attain. It needs to be something inspiring, like Kennedy's, moonshot, the
Yeah.
very first literal moonshot. Like, we're going to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade and bring him home safely. Like, that was it. And
Yeah.
and they did it, and it was extremely inspiring, for a whole nation. So, like, a lot of people I'm finding don't think big enough either. They're like, well, and that's been some of the fun of it, is to get people to think bigger and then actually exceed their expectations. That this has happened with coaching clients, and I love it, because they're, I can think of one, for example, who is like, when we started, was like, well, I don't want to get too big, and he was in a place where, he has an agency and in a niche market,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe eight people, and been at it for 7-8 years, and doing all right, and kind of hitting like a million milestone, million revenue. So still, on the small side, but um, kind of feeling worn out, and I'm not sure how long I want to do this. And, it's a younger guy, like in his
Yeah.
30s. And so I always start with, well, where do you want to go? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just forget it. Just what do you want to do? It's, well, ideally, I had this vision, like, I'd love to move back to the Pacific Northwest, like your territory, like, buy a house on Vashon Island or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, by when, in getting a young guy, anybody really, think 5-10 years ahead. That's, it's like, it's hard enough to think, about next year. But
Yeah.
I don't know, at some point, because I might want to do something different. Okay, well, let's just start with that. Okay, so that house is probably gonna cost you $5 million, $6 million, whatever, today, in today's dollars. So, let's say, and I'm doing shorthand here, but this is the stuff that you do all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so let's say you've got a $10 million business. It's an agency. Like, it depends on the multiples and the
Yeah.
timing and all that kind of stuff. But maybe that nets you, I don't know, 20 million or something, in a sale. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys know all about it. That'll buy you a house on Vashon Island, and some breathing room to do whatever you want to do next, So let's
Yep.
just start with that. You want a $10 million business, okay? Like, what's the time frame? Okay, let's just say 5 to 10 years. Okay, let's pick a number, 2030. Let's just pick 2030. Let's work backward from there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get there? And then, that gets into like all this stuff about OKRs and smaller bits. And but the larger piece, the larger piece is, again, about purpose, and it's not just about you, it's about your employees. Like, how do you motivate your employees? They, you need to give them an inspiring vision, and a purpose, and talk about impact. And then, what is impact? It's changing lives. That's what it comes down to: changing people's lives. And when people talk about purpose, there's, they're like, I got to be Patagonia, like, I got to be changing the world, like a huge environmental mission. Like, that's one way to do it. And
Yeah.
they walk the walk, they put their money where their mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
They're a B Corp too. I don't know if you know about that. Like, B Corp, it's a whole, do you know that, about B Corp? Yeah,
Yeah. I've heard of them.
whole thing. But that's not the only way to do it. Just even treating your people well, like having a great culture, like, that's
Yeah.
one way to make an impact. And again, think about the ripple effect on their families, and then on your clients, thinking about all your stakeholders, and then really aligning that with your values, and making sure you walk the walk. And you got to cultivate that stuff. Like, it's like gardening. You got to
Yeah.
water the
Yeah.
the good stuff, and you got to rip out the old stuff, and toss it out. I mean, the bad
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I think one of the things that leaders, when they're plateauing, they forget how important it is to keep spreading the vision,
Right.
because that vision is always pulling us forward, leading us there so we can see where we want to go. And if you stop communicating the vision, like you said, start out with your strategic why are we doing this, why we're, how are we going to make an impact, how are we going to help our community, ourselves, our employees, all that.
Mhm.
But once you stop as a leader, doing that, because it almost, I really admire these companies that do it consistently every
Yeah.
single day, that really do it, because they are the ones that you see. You mentioned Google. They know what they're doing every day. They know where they're trying to go every single day. Everybody's trying to keep everybody rolling the same way. And the companies that do that well, I think they have far fewer plateaus, because we're always looking to the next hill, because we just got to the top of this one. But
Exactly.
our end goal, kind of, it's great and it's really pulling us, but it's continuing to move away from us just a little bit as we see it.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And it involves like, you're never done. Like if you
Yeah,
think you're done, then you probably
you're
are
done.
done.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about plateaus. What are some of the things that you see when you're coaching people that really, that you go, so if someone's listening today and they're wondering, am I plateaued or not? What are some
Yeah.
of the things that you see that would be common, that they would go, well, maybe I am?
Yeah. You're not growing either in revenue or profitability, or if you are, it's inconsistent. It's not a steady line. It's some up, there's some down.
Yeah.
And that's one. People are leaving, or you can't retain good people, or you've had the same people forever, and you love them to death, but in your in your heart and in your mind that you're going to need other people if you're going to make this, if you're going to get to where you want to go. um, if you keep having the same issues over and over again, or the same conversations over and over again, and you don't feel like you're making any progress, you've plateaued. If you're still doing what you were doing, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, like, you've plateaued. Um, those are some examples. I'm trying to think. What are some common ones that you see? Others?
Well, I was just going to ask you, how long do you think it is before someone should say, hey, we've plateaued? Is it 6 months? Is it 90 days? Is it 5 years? What do you think?
Well, it kind of depends on your cash flow and
Yeah, that's true.
right. But I mean, 5 years definitely. Like, where I had, you won't see it necessarily. A lot of it depends on scale too. I think, like, if you're at 50 million and you go from 50 to 51 and 51 to 47 and 47 to 50 and 50 to 43, like it's okay. It's not until you hit 43 that you realize, okay, we're definitely plateaued.
Yeah.
Although to me, if you're not growing consistently, even if the revenue or the profitability may lag like a year or two, but if you're not growing in some deliberate way, like, I know we weren't as profitable this year as last year because we hired a bunch of great new people. Okay, right. So, like, you can't just look at the revenue numbers, but you have to look at it strategically. Like, if you're deliberately investing in the business, yeah, that number, your top line is going to go down, or your bottom line is going to go down. And but at least you're making progress. But if that doesn't next year then lead to some kind of growth that shows up, I think, in the bottom line, then then something probably still isn't working. Either you didn't hire the right people, or your strategy isn't working.
Yeah.
um or you're not done yet. You're not, and again, you're never done until you're done, and then it's over. And so, to me, constant growth is the thing. And I was thinking about this earlier, just like how you start by, like, making something, and then it really becomes more about how you make it. It's more like about the methodology than the thing itself, because that's the thing that you keeps building, that keeps you going. It's the process.
That is
um
a great point. It's how you do it, in the process of doing it, and getting really efficient and really good at doing it, to continue to do it at scale and larger volumes, and more efficiently.
Exactly. And then also thinking about, like, how could we use the same process to do something else, that
Mhm.
brings in another source of revenue. And that's, where I've seen, a lot of light bulbs go off for people. It's like, talking about clients, where my my advice is always like, don't turn down like an opportunity to grow. Like this young CEO is like, well, we have an opportunity to do like trade packaging, so it's something we haven't done before, and it's like, so we can't do that. It's like, why can't you do that? Like all the things involved in doing it, like you do most of those things. It's just like a different channel or a different medium,
Mm-hmm.
but like, is there any reason why you can't do it? I guess not. And now they're doing it, of course, and it's not only another source of revenue, but it's leading to other opportunities. So that's just an example. And what matters more, I think, is the talent that you have on your team and the process that you use. So are you gonna say something?
No, I'm agreeing with you there. I'm agreeing the talent you have on your team. I mean, I think you said it before a bit ago. You have people leaving or have the right people, had the same people there forever, but
Yeah,
those people aren't growing. I mean,
yeah,
I think as
grow.
you get bigger, your team is what really is going to constrain you.
Yeah, for sure. Growth. I mean, I've never been in a situation. I've never had like a successful transformation that didn't involve a change of personnel. It doesn't mean everybody. It's not
Yeah.
like 100% turnover. Like, and you try and save as many as possible, and it may be, a new role. Here again, like this is where we, can get back to the frameworks of like, what makes the right person in the right seat, and do they align with your core values? That's one thing. If it's not a core values fit, and here's the thing: the core values, you write them in such a way that it can be a filter, right? I mean, talk about core values, they should lead to more no's than yeses in a way. They're exclusive in some ways, rather than, what I mean, it's like it's deciding who you want and who you don't.
Yes.
And I've worked with people to write core values to address issues that they consistently have, but have failed to address. This is one way to do that. So, for example, people are afraid of conflict, and this is so common, right? People
Oh
don't
yeah.
know how to do conflict. Well, make that a core value, and you write it in such a way, like, we try to be, kind but direct, and in resolving problems together, however you want to put it. But then when that comes up again and somebody's avoiding the issue, like, you can point back to that and say, look, this is a core value of ours. Like, either you're with us on that or you're not. So that's one thing. But then there's also like kind of fitness for the role. Does it really
Yeah.
fuel them? Is it really the right time for them? And can they make an impact in the role? Um, can they grow with the role? I mean, you mentioned growth, like your employees aren't growing. Like, as long as they're growing, that's huge. Like, growth mindset. Like, I'm all about growth mindset. I think I was about growth mindset before I even knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
Just I like to learn, and that motivates me. And I think you want people who are going to be able to grow with you, and who like to grow, who
Mm-hmm.
who aren't just, well, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. Like, okay, well, then we're gonna have to, either you figure it out, or we'll have to hire somebody else to do it, and then I'm not sure what you're gonna do anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the thing about scaling too. I mean, when we're talking about these plateaus, there are certain points when what we did yesterday was perfectly fine, but over time it's gotten to be more and more arduous to handle the scale that we're at, that we
yeah,
need to do a complete reset on what we do and start over with a different system, different process, whatever, just because we have to. And that's where I think a lot of companies get plateaued, because you get people that are
yeah,
so resistant to system change that it just stops the growth. And they go, well, we need to hire more people. Well, you don't need to hire more people, because pretty soon you find I've got rooms full of people, but we still have the same issue.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, because I'm trying to think, like, we grew, like, at this other company, $100 million, and I think that was all, like, we did Agile Scrum, like, that's what I love about the system. It's so flexible that it could grow, and we never outgrew it. But I do think there must be inflection points where It depends. I mean, you want a system that's flexible and adaptable
Yeah.
and scale, but there are some that break.
Yes. Yes. But I think by using the Agile Scrum methodology, you were able to continue pushing the boundaries of what are we going to do, reinventing what we're doing on a consistent basis
Yes. Yeah.
to stay ahead of that. And that's where most companies, they go, oh, we haven't changed this forever because it works. We just don't even mess with it.
Right. Right. If it ain't
And they're
broke,
not sitting there looking at, well, that was fine yesterday. And like in e-commerce, it's a real common thing. Well, 5 years ago, we might have done, 100 transactions a day. Now we're doing 1,000 transactions a day, or 2,000 or 5,000. And the systems just can't do it, especially if you were doing it manual at one time, and, you just can't anymore.
Right. Right. And if and what are you gonna do? Shut down the whole operation, to make the switch, right? So it's like
Mhm.
constant, again, like Toyota, like Kaizen, it's continuous improvement,
Yeah.
constant innovation, continuous change. Like, again, you have to embrace that. I think in any industry, really, like
Yes.
that, the Googles, the software people, the intellectual property people, that's the status quo. It may be different in older industries, but here again, I think more and more in today's, marketplace, you have to adapt that mentality of how are we going to continually innovate, and otherwise you're going to get, either crushed from above or disrupted from below. You need to be thinking, you need to embrace change, and that's very hard for a lot of people, especially,
Mhm.
companies have been around for a long time, and that's why I guess change management consultants exist.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I feel like, that's what we do too. It's just
Yes.
like,
Well, we have to continue to do it because we have to help others do it.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yep. So when you're talking about system and soul, you mentioned that. And so what really drew you into using this methodology?
Yeah. Uh, well, I like it. I mentioned a little bit earlier because it has more of the people side of things to it. It's robust in terms of tools that address human issues. So, it starts with this one-page roadmap where you define your hedgehog concept. That's from Jim Collins' Good to Great,
Hmm.
and your why and your BHAG and your owniness statement, which is like, you define your sandbox or your playing field. We're the only what, like, what do you do? Like, it seems obvious, but you can niche it. Like when you describe like what you guys do, like it could be, or for me, like, you know, like how do I describe what I do as a coach? Like because everybody's a coach, and then what's the differentiator? It's like first
Yeah.
you define the playing space, and then within that playing space, what's going to differentiate you? And then, there's this whole cultural engineering piece, like where we're looking at, what's that ideal culture that you want to build? Let's describe it, and then let's go back to your core values and revisit those. And then what are some of the organizational habits that you could cultivate, that would help bring this to life? And they all, they go together. And, there's some good examples of that. And, like what core value I love from a client is, um, everybody makes the coffee, and that's a great one. It's a statement, and you could break it down into attributes, but like those attributes would be like, it's a democratic organization. It's not huge on hierarchy, like whether you're the CEO or the summer intern, you drink the last cup of coffee, you make the next pot, like that
Yeah.
says something about the culture. And
Yeah.
then, how do you take it out of the lunchroom and extrapolate that to everything else we do? And then there's a whole bunch of, like there's a personal roadmap. So for your employees, you can figure like what career roadmap, like here again,
Yeah.
aligning career goals and aspirations with company goals. How do they fit together? We do Patrick Lencioni stuff. There's a lot of stuff that you can, it's open source. That's the other thing. So it's constantly borrowing and partnering with other organizations. So it's very dynamic, a lot of new tools. Um, Coaches are inventing new tools, and it's a very collaborative coaching community. So sharing tools with each other, and like, oh, here's another one, like the six dimensions of compensation. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. This idea of giving up 23% of your lifetime earnings for work that is meaningful. What are the other ways that people get compensated? You know, psychological, spiritual, which is like meaning, physical, like, you know, having the flexibility to work from home or, you know, take time off. What else? I mean, there's others that, you know, and each person's a little bit different. Like their profile is going to look different. So you could throw as much money as you want at somebody. If that doesn't really, if that's not what moves them, they're like, no, man, this work is boring the hell out of me. Like or, you know, it's not going to make a difference. So, I like it that it's holistic in that sense. You know, you got the system side and the soul side, and they need to, you know, it's like a yin yang kind of thing. Like they both need to fit together, and they speak to each other, and it's a dynamic thing. It never stops. You, like, here again, you never get it perfect, but it's something to strive for. So, and I like that mentality, and it's constantly evolving too. So it kind of fits.
Well, you can continue helping your clients move forward in different ways, because as soon as you think you've got one thing we've addressed, there's something else that crops up, because like you said, it's a continuous process. And
exactly, it grows with you. It can grow with you as your business grows, because your needs will change and evolve.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Mark, it's been incredible talking to you again and catching you up on this, and just talking to you about breaking through these business plateaus, getting your feedback on how you're helping clients, learn a bit more about system and soul. That's cool to see what you're doing there and how that integrates more of the people, the impact, all with the performance of the organization and some of the other things we see across the board. But what's the best way if someone wants to reach out and talk to you to get a hold of you?
Thanks. And thanks for asking. You know, I think LinkedIn is best. You know, you can find me, just my name, Mark Scrimenti, on LinkedIn. And I've got a website too. It's vividpathconsulting.com. It needs an overhaul. So, you know, I'm not too proud of it right now. You can come see it. You can visit me there. But the best way to do it, I think, is connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm open. So just reach out, connect.
All right.
Send a connection request, and I will respond.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thanks so much for stopping by today. And as always, dropping your enlightening knowledge with us and really helping us understand more about, you know, how you're helping people break through these plateaus in their business and really engage people better and build better organizations.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. And I hope the listeners get something out of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I just want to say that thanks for the comment. We had a couple comments in here. Thanks for dropping those comments. And those of you that came in late, go back to the beginning, because Mark shared some really important golden nuggets from the beginning. Listen to the whole thing. We appreciate you, even if you did not drop a comment, because we know we're out there. And I'm so grateful to have a guest like Mark today. We will be back again next week, everyone. Hang out with me, Mark, when we're offline, and we'll wrap up.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.